those all off. Let me get to Dr. Stanley Goldfarb. I want to talk about something we've kicked around now and then that has to do with woke in medicine. And I'm a big fan of the people going into medicine being the most qualified individuals they can possibly be, not checking any particular boxes one way or the other. And there's a group called Do No Harm Medicine, donoharm.org. DoNoHarmMedicine.org, I believe is the website. I'll check that with Dr. Stanley Goldfarb right now. How you doing, doctor? Did I get that right?
I'm doing well. Great to be with you. That's right. DoNoHarmMedicine.org.
All right. Tell us a little bit about what Do No Harm Medicine is all about, and then we'll dig into this medical school issue, which you've raised in your latest op-ed.
Right. Well, we're an organization that has now 30,000 members, including doctors and other healthcare workers and patients who are interested, that's devoted to getting rid of all identity politics and discriminatory practices in medicine. And another mission that we have is also to stop so-called gender-affirming care of children. We don't make any point about adults, but we think children should never go through those kinds of procedures that are dangerous to them. But right. The focus sort of our discussion today is the fact that we want to get rid of identity politics in healthcare. And exactly as you said, we want to have merit be the driving force in who gets to be a doctor, who gets to teach doctors, and how medicine is practiced in this country.
How long has the practice of medicine, been afflicted by a whole lot of identity politics? And something tells me it's probably for longer than we thought, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. Could you help us understand it?
Yeah, some of the ideas actually go back to the end of World War II, but in America, this became an issue sort of around the turn of the century, around the year 2000, when the decision was made that, we have to have more minorities in medicine, particularly Black individuals. And the argument went that would improve health care for Black patients. Black patients tend to have worse health outcomes. And it was just easy to attribute it to the fact that in more recent years that doctors were treating them in some sort of racist fashion.
Was it kind of a correlation equals causation kind of approach that they were taking back then?
Exactly. And when this issue has been studied, and it has been studied extensively in the medical literature, and our group has reported on these studies, there are 6 systematic reviews which encompass all the 60-some-odd publications that have been done about this issue. It shows that Black patients want the best doctors. The outcomes are no better if a Black patient has a Black doctor than if a Black patient has a white doctor or vice versa. And this idea really is simply one of deciding that diversity in and of itself is valuable and we should have it. Now, diversity is fine under certain circumstances, but when it comes to healthcare, when you go to the doctor, you want the best person available to be caring for you. And you don't want people admitted to medical school simply because of the way they look. And unfortunately, that's been going on for quite a while. The Supreme Court case, Students for Fair Admissions against Harvard and North Carolina, had the Supreme Court declare that we should get rid of all affirmative action in higher education. And our organization is firmly committed to trying to make sure that the same is true in medical schools. And medical schools have had a problem because they have had a desire to bring in minority students, again, for this false idea that was going to improve healthcare somehow. And that has led to people that are more qualified not getting admission. For example, there are 55,000 applicants for 22,000 places in American medical schools. So if someone gets taken in to medical school that really is less worthy than someone who's rejected, that person who's rejected will not get to be a physician.
Has it been conflated though, to have the highest quality or the most accomplished student going into medical school? Has that been it's been conflated with racism? Is that how it's been done over the last 20, 25 years here, Doctor?
That's right. And the fact is that there is no qualified Black applicant that's been rejected from medical school, and that's fine. I think any qualified individual really can get in, but the point is to make sure that they're the most qualified, and to set a low bottom to a low floor to the admission process is doing no one a favor. And there's a higher dropout rate for minorities who have been taken in with less good qualifications. students are the ones that are hurt the most. And that's been true in the undergraduate admissions as well as in medical school.
Now, wasn't it the Asian students that actually sued Harvard over that, in that case, the Supreme Court case, if I recall?
Exactly. And they won the case. And the law now is in this country that you cannot use race as a determining factor in admission to any higher education facility.
Well, then, Dr. Goldfarb, why do we still have this problem then? What has happened? Has someone changed the rules or tried to hide it behind the scenes in the medical school system?
Yeah, exactly that they have sort of ignored it, and they've ignored it by denying that they're using race, but they're doing things like making sure that they have an applicant comes from a certain geographic region that we know has a particular racial characteristic, that sort of thing. So our organization has done some research on this, and it turns out that in a pretty small sample of medical schools, we tried to get data from many, many more, but only 23 supplied us with data. The majority of them, there was good evidence that they were admitting Black students and other racial minorities over more qualified individuals. And when I talk about qualifications, I'm talking about grades in college as well as the Medical College Achievement Test, which is an objective test that people take to determine their suitability for medical school. And how well someone does on that exam does predict how well they're going to be do as a medical student and ultimately as a physician. There's very good evidence for that.
Is there any evidence, though, that the MCAT, the actual exam itself, Dr. Goldfarb, has some racially biased questioning or methodology that might give credit to, well, this is why we have to do something? No?
None at all. And I must say, the other argument has always been that, disadvantaged people don't get the tutoring, don't get this and that for objective exams when it comes to the SAT for college. But remember, medical school applicants have finished college, so they're supposedly well educated. And I think that those issues about preparation and all that sort of go out the window at that point. So it's a very good predictor of who's going to be admitted to medical school. And unfortunately, we found evidence that in some schools, a Black student has 10 times the chance of being admitted as a white student. We found this at University of Wisconsin. We found this at Eastern Virginia Medical School. And again, we only had a small sample of the 180-odd medical schools in the United States. So we think this is going on much more widespread than has been supposed. And so schools are getting around. We've called it skirting SCOTUS. We wrote a paper about this that we published, skirting the decision that the Supreme Court made that there should be no more racial profiling when it comes to admitting people to medical school. So I came up with a plan, which I think maybe we were alluding to, that is the way that medical school admissions ought to go.
Yeah, what would you suggest here? Because it's certainly great to talk about an issue that we've been suffering with, Dr. Goldfarb, but is there a way out of this problem?
Well, I think there is. I think that the way medical school admissions have gone has really gone off the rails, if you will. There's been so much of a focus on diversity. It's not only been racial diversity, it's been all kinds of diversity, whether people have had interesting other careers before they went into medicine, whether they've climbed mountains, whether they've done all these sorts of things, which to me is really absurd, because when you go to the doctor, you just want someone who really knows what they're doing. That's the key thing. And what their past experience is really becomes irrelevant. You want someone who's kind and empathetic, but you also really want someone who knows what they're doing.
We want someone who's kind of hyper-focused on the task at hand, right? Getting you better.
Exactly. I mean, those other things are wonderful traits, but really the job for a physician, as far as society is concerned, is to make people better. Is to cure disease when you can, comfort people when you can't cure, and give them the best possible treatment. That should be the goal, and it shouldn't matter what they look like, and it shouldn't matter what their past experiences were. It should only matter what they're like right now as a caregiver and someone who can provide you with the best possible medical therapy.
Now, Dr. Goldfarb, I was looking at your op-ed, then your piece in National Review, and so what you think should happen is a minimum, is that all medical admissions should have a minimum score in what the college entry tests and the MCAT. What is your plan? Like, how high should it have to be?
Yeah, so here's the plan. First of all, we think that everybody that you should have at least an average score in order to qualify. In other words, you'd be in the top 50% of all those who take the exam. And remember, only 1 out of 3 students who apply to medical school gets in. So there would be plenty of people in the top half to allow filling medical school classes.
But you at least have to hit in above 50%. I think that's a reasonable way of looking at it. Okay, what then?
Now the next plan would be every school would determine its own floor for its admissions based on the scores on the MCAT and grades. And every student would have to have multiple letters to show that they are people of high ethical standards and character. Harvard Medical School might set that floor at a very high level because they have the most talented students apply there.
Very prestigious,
Other
yes.
schools might decide to do it somewhat lower. That would be fine. Whatever they want to do. But after they have this cohort that achieves their floor, at that point there would be a lottery. And the lottery would determine which students are ranked in order to be admitted. So a school might admit 3 or 4 times as many students as they could accommodate. The lottery would list the students from 1 down to whatever the bottom number was, and they would just pick people from that ranking.
So there's a pre-qualifying educational attainment first, and then into a lottery. The lottery ends up making the final decision rather than. I guess this would also get rid of legacy, right? Of legacy admissions too, right?
It would get rid of everything but the student's academic achievements as the basis for entering medical school, as long, again, as they have evidence of good character, good ethical standards.
All right. Now, who would be the one to make that decision of imposing this? Just curious.
Well, I think as much goes on in higher education, it sort of depends on who the funder is. In states that have public medical schools, University of Oregon, for example, or other states that have public medical schools, the state would determine these are the rules for medical schools receiving state funding.
Oh, boy, I'll tell you, in the state of Oregon, they love the DEI world, though. That would be a high lift
well,
here.
I understand, but there are a lot of states in the union, and there's also the federal government, which, as we've seen, has had tremendous sway over education because of the fact that so many schools are dependent on federal funding, either through their grant programs or through other federal programs. So there could be, sort of the leverage that can be used through funding to sort of push this. And I also think it's the sort of thing that, that people ought to start to ask for. They ought to talk to their representatives and push for this, because right now there really is a game being played in medical school admissions, including, as you point out, legacies. There's an awful lot of that going on, where more qualified students are not having this opportunity because of these kinds of programs that medical school admissions committees have.
Dr. Goldfarb, I wanted to just float a theory to you, and I'm wondering if there is a hope, and like I said, I don't know this for sure, but I want to float a theory to you. Is there a possibility that the rise of artificial intelligence being merged into medicine is being championed by the medical world in order to cover for the failures of unqualified medical people being rushed through the medical system? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think this whole issue of dilution of the rigor, the number of people who pass medical school and graduate is over 98%. In most professional schools, the number is far lower than that because many people enter the professional school like law school or nursing school or veterinary school and find out that they're just not up to it, either because of their personal abilities, their intellect, or their willingness to work hard in the field. Not in medical school. In medical school, everybody gets through.
Wow. Of all the professional schools, I would have thought that medical would have been the toughest to get through.
Exactly. But it isn't. And the reason it isn't is because of this push to have diversity. And in fact, the accrediting agencies have pushed for this for many, many years. If schools have too many students who don't do well and leave, that becomes a mark against them when accreditation time comes. So they're supposed to have all sorts of coaching programs, and most schools have this, where they spend enormous amounts of money and faculty time on coaching students, making sure they pass exams. They're given the information on what's going to be on the exam. They take the exam. If they fail the exam, they take it again. If they fail it, they take it again.
Wow.
Occasionally, someone actually just can't do the work, but it is a quite a rare event in medical education for students to flunk out of medical school.
I had no idea. Is there any way that we, as a patient, we go in and we have a medical doctor, physician, surgeon, or whatever, is there a way that we can tell if someone was kind of pushed through the system because of checking boxes rather than being the most qualified? I don't know. I thought I'd at least ask you.
Not really.
Oh.
And what's really unfortunate is that minority physicians who are really talented, brilliant, very effective, successful, they become demeaned because of the current activity, because patients then go into the room and see, a face of someone of color and say, "Oh, this must be a DEI."
Yeah, this person got through because of because they weren't okay. Yes. Yeah, that hurts them.
That's how it harms. That's how it harms the minority physicians who really deserve, to be physicians and deserve to have all the credit that they may have accrued to themselves. So that's another problem with affirmative action and these kinds of approaches in general. But no, there's no real simple way. It used to be that one could look for whether their physician was in one of the medical honor societies, and there are a couple of them. And the problem is they've even diluted that. So it used to be that medical honor societies were based on grades. Now they're based on overall citizenship, this sort of thing. So even the best and the brightest don't get that. But nonetheless, I think if someone's in a medical honor society, Alpha Omega Alpha is the medical society, the most prominent one in medicine. That's a sign of a student who's in the top 15% of their class. That's the requirement to get into that. It used to be they cut back on that and said, you don't have to be in the top 15%, but you have to be an outstanding citizen. Well, I don't, when I go to my doctor, I really don't care whether they're outstanding citizens. I want them to know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Give me the best.
Exactly. If I'm going in for brain surgery, I want to make sure that they know how to do brain surgery in the best of all worlds, that kind of thing. Interesting. Hey, really common sense that you're talking about here. I'm going to post that link to the National Review deal. And is there DoNoHarmMedicine.org is the main website. Is there any other place where you're writing on so people can catch up on this? Because it makes perfect sense what you're proposing here.
Well, our organization writes a lot. We've been in the Wall Street Journal. We've been in a whole number of publications. And our website is really just chock full of interesting information, a lot of research that we've done. We're a very data-driven organization, so it's not ideology. We're pushing it's data and science. And anybody, and we'd love to have people join us as members. There's no cost to membership, and it will allow us to continue to supply people with information about these issues.
I appreciate that. And final question. Since you can't really look at someone's qualifications on the wall and understand that they didn't get through because of the DEI push over the last 20, 25 years, what if you were dealing with a very old doctor? And I know someone who has been maybe practicing 35, 40 years, did they maybe get through without that kind of philosophy running the medical schools? Could that be a way of looking at it?
Yeah, people have said that. It's complex. I mean, it's also important that you be trained in a rigorous fashion and know the latest kinds of approaches. So
True.
It sort of depends. I think a good thing to do is to sort of ask the primary care doctor that you have about who they think is the best physician in the community for a particular medical problem if you need a referral, and go with that, because the best doctors have the reputation of being the most effective ones.
That's good. I'll keep that in mind if it ever comes up here, all right? Dr. Stanley Goldfarb once again. And he is the chairman of Do No Harm, DoNoHarmMedicine.org. Doctor, great talk. We'll have you back on. Be well.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Great story there. It is 8:32 at KMED.